I feel very honored and thankful to be invited tonight with my family who is sitting here, Ashley, Mark, and Prima, my sister. We came to Dublin yesterday from San Francisco. This is my first time in Ireland, and I must tell you, you have such a beautiful country. In the next 20-25 minutes, I would share with you a perspective of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I'm here as one of you, as your family. I'm not here to disrupt your way of life, but rather I'm here to remind you that come what may, no matter who you may be, we all share one common humanity. We all are members of one another. And whatever happens to one of us, and yes, even the least of us, happens to all of us. I'll be showing some autopsy pictures, so I beg your pardon if some find that unattractive, but I'm a forensic pathologist. I have to show you some pictures. You know, many times I've been around the world to give talks. People come expecting to hear about traumatic brain injury. This is more about traumatic brain injury. It's more about sports. Rather, it's about the humanity of all of us. The humanity of science and the humanity of my faith. I have an MBA from one of the top business schools in the world, Carnegie Mellon University, Tepper School of Business. And one of the first concepts I learned in my first week of business school was the central limit theorem. The central limit theorem is the foundational principle of mathematics, of statistics. And what it tells us is that in whatever measurable human index, in whatever measurable human behavior, that we as a species of mankind have a tendency to homogenize ourselves towards a certain expectation. And about 97% of us would fall within plus or minus 3 standard deviation of that expectation. And about 3 to 4% of us will be outsiders, outliers, marginal people. But throughout all human history, mankind has a tendency to dismiss the marginal people, the marginal index, ostracize the marginal, dismiss them and ridicule them. And such a phenomenon leads to what I have called conformational intelligence. We would be talking about conformational intelligence tonight. I hope you wouldn't be disappointed. It took me 10 years to come up with this concept because I wondered why a no-name Nigerian doctor like myself, who knew nothing about football, who knew nothing about rugby, I did not even know what a quarterback was. I did not know what the NFL was. I was only 3 months outside my fellowship as a neuropathology fellow. I was a nobody. I discovered a disease in America's most popular sport, the richest league in the world. And when I reported my findings, physicians from the best hospitals in America, the topmost physicians in America, attacked me, ridiculed me, dismissed me. And I wondered why. Conformational intelligence is a phenomenon we all suffer from, including myself, whereby your intuition, your intelligence, the perception of your environment, your mentality, the cast of your mind is controlled by the expectations of society, by the traditions of society, by the norms and mores of society, by the mentality of society and by the cast of the mind of society without you even knowing it. Either the society or the group you belong to, without you even being aware of it. And now, if for any reason some objective evidence, including scientific evidence, is provided to you to undermine the cast of your mind or your mentality, you dismiss that objective evidence, you ridicule it, or you deny it. And if that evidence persists, you become emotional. You react to it emotionally with so much emotionality that borders on tribalism. Conformational intelligence impedes and lowers your emotional IQ and makes you less objective about a certain cast of the mind. That was why, during my research into CTE, I researched as far back as Hippocrates, 400 BC. Hippocrates named it commotio cerebri. It is a very well-established and generally accepted principle of medicine and science that whenever you engage in any human behavior that exposes your head to repeated blows or repeated acceleration, deceleration, there is a risk, a reasonable risk of permanent brain damage. Then when I identified this disease, similar to the disease we see in boxers, I was rejected. Because I was an outsider. I was a marginal physician. I was not part of the expected establishment. And we continue to struggle with that today. Even doctors, very respected and highly profiled doctors, would deny that engaging in a sport, in the high-impact, high-contact collision sport like rugby or football, does not have any reasonable chance of causing brain damage. Tell that to Hippocrates. When we engage in this conformational intelligence, we become very tribal. And this is what I travel around the world, not even talking to universities, but leaders of corporations. How much is this phenomenon affecting corporations, the original creativity of individuals? And this is me. My sister Winnie would confirm that. This was when I was 4 years old. This is my family. You can see how stony my face looks in that picture. My life was as stony as my face in that picture. I was born during the Nigerian Civil War. Why my parents chose to conceive me in a time of war, I do not know. Maybe sex was the only reasonable recreational activity. In fact, there were even refugees. So I was born in a dilapidated refugee hospital. I was malnourished. I struggled with depression because I suffered war-related psychological trauma. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I've struggled with depression all my life. I had a low self-esteem. I still have a low self-esteem. But what makes you successful in life is not the number of successes you have, but the number of shortcomings and failures you are able to embrace, to manage, turn around, and create value from. And that was all I did. The picture you see here was me, actually taken by my wife. We had been married for a couple of months. She saw me examining brains at home, and she wondered what a strange man, a weird man she had married. And she took these pictures so that when she eventually made up her mind to leave me, she would send these pictures to my parents and to her parents. You could have him back. But I lost my job. This was after the Mike Webster paper. I lost my job. There was no single university institution or organization in America that gave me a platform to do my research because I attacked the fundamental conformational cast of the mind of America. But I remain true to who I am. I learned in my childhood that the best thing I could do for myself is to be myself. So I took these brains home. I worked on them on my balcony. I put them in tissue cassettes and would send them to a local lab to do the analysis for me. And when I had the big brains, I couldn't examine this on my balcony, otherwise my neighbors would call the cops on me. I was sneaking into a local university hospital late at night when there was nobody to examine these brains. This was actually the 3rd case of CTE. This was the 5th case. This was Chris Benoit's brain. Chris Benoit was a wrestler who killed his wife, killed his son, and killed himself. He had CTE. And oh yes, if you had seen the movie, this was late at night. You could see my big tummy. I may have had too many a bottle of Guinness now. You could see my condominium. I was still single. I examined the brains on my autopsy, this is not the autopsy table, my kitchen table. I'm on my dining table. But what this shows us was an illustration of the battle I had to face. In spite of the fundamental truth of science, the society I lived in rejected the scientific evidence because of the infatuational bond America has and continues to have with football. And same applies to many other societies across the world. This was the first paper of CTE. When I published this paper, I never, ever imagined that I would be standing before you tonight on a podium talking about brain trauma. I thought I was doing something good that would enhance the life of each and every one of us. But since this paper, I have lost my life. I have become a victim, like every other rugby or football players. The truth is inconvenient, my brothers and sisters. I shall not reject or deny the truth because of the inconvenience of truth. People who tell you that playing rugby is safe are not telling you the truth. Or any other high-impact, high-contact sport. And by the high-impact, high-contact sports, I mean rugby, American football, ice hockey, mixed martial arts, boxing, and wrestling. We have always known that in the literature, going as far back as Hippocrates. This was the 27 or 32 names I had come across while I was looking for a name to give this disease. I wanted to use a name that was already in the literature so that the court of law would accept it. If I had used a novel name like dementia footballitica, it would have been a novelty, and the court of law in America would have rejected it. That is called the Dobbert principle. Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy was the most appropriate name for me to use. If I have time later, I'll explain why I chose Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy. You would hear sports leagues talk about concussions. But if there is any take-home lesson for you tonight, the issue is not about concussions. Concussions do not cause CTE. Concussions do not cause permanent brain damage. Concussion is a disease. What causes a concussion is a blow to the head or acceleration, deceleration injury of the brain. What causes CTE is a blow to the head. Concussions are not a problem. The fundamental problem in high-impact, high-contact sports is the exposure to blunt force trauma of the head with or without concussions. What is more prevalent are sub-concussions. Sub-concussions, whenever you receive a blow to your head or you're within 50 yards of an explosion, there is acceleration, deceleration of your brain inside your skull, and there is cellular injury, membrane, vascular, and cytoskeletal injury that wouldn't manifest with any incapacitating symptom. Subconcussions are more prevalent. The pictures you see are the pictures of Mike Webster's brain. With CTE, CT scans were negative, MRIs were negative. When I did his autopsy, his brain looked normal. But his brain on the cellular level had CTE. This is a brain of a 24-year-old football player who suffered a concussion and died within 2 weeks. Can you tell me the difference? Mike Webster was 50 years old. There's no difference. When you suffer a concussion and you go to the emergency room, CT scan will be negative. MRI will be negative. But if you play a game of rugby, 2 to 3 hours later, you're having headaches. This is the normal brain, how it looks. This is how your brain will look. Meanwhile, you may not be having any incapacitating symptom. But on the cellular level, you subject the brain to amyloid precursor protein. There's cytoskeletal injury. 2 to 3 hours after just one game of rugby. All it will take to damage your child's brain, the literature has shown, I'll show you 1 or 2 papers tonight, is only 1 season. That after only 1 season of football or ice hockey or rugby, any high-impact contact sport, that your child may have suffered permanent brain injury. This is not my opinion, this is scientific evidence. And this is another picture of amyloid precursor protein. Meanwhile, remember, this is how the brain should look. A beautiful sea of blue. Now, after a game of rugby or football, you build up amyloid precursor protein. As the weeks go by, the amyloid precursor protein disappears. You start having astrogliosis, vasculitis, chronic inflammation, buildup of CD68 histiocytes. You begin to lose myelin. So these chronic inflammatory changes will be ongoing in your brain for weeks, months, years. And at some point, which we do not know yet, you begin to accumulate tau, amyloid, TDP43 protein. It's permanent. This was a paper that came out recently that proposes that a concussion is a permanent disease. The human brain is post-mitotic, does not have any reasonable capacity to regenerate itself after blows to the head. And the blows to the head would initiate a spectrum of diseases called the traumatic encephalopathy syndromes. So we should stop compartmentalizing traumatic brain injury. It's a spectrum of diseases. And once you've suffered a concussion, like I have told many hospital executives, your disease is permanent. It's going to stay with you for your entire life, just like a stroke would. There is nothing mild about a concussion. Concussion was classified as a mild traumatic brain injury by the NFL. And if you read the paper, without any scientific backup, it was an at-whim classification to mitigate the seriousness of a concussion. And in the spectrum of the diseases, you have the subconcussions, concussions, post-concussion syndromes, motor cognitive and psychiatric symptoms, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, post-traumatic encephalopathy. The difference between chronic traumatic encephalopathy and post-traumatic encephalopathy is that in CTE, you don't have any evidence of local damage of the brain. But in PTE, you have evidence of local or focal damage. The commonest variant of PTE is post-traumatic epilepsy. And then you have other broad spectrum of dementias, including CTE, Alzheimer's disease, CTE, frontotemporal lobar degeneration. Pardon the jargon, but there are other dementias, including PTSD. Because in 2010, we identified the very first ever reported case of CTE in a military veteran diagnosed with PTSD. And there's a paper of ours coming out in the fall, the blast variant of CTE caused by exposure to repeated blasts. So this is the state of the science. This was a paper published in 2007 that shows that when you play football, you have a 40 times increased risk of suffering ALS. An autopsy series are now showing that it's not actually ALS, it's CTE ALS, with tau accumulating in the spinal cord and not TDP-43. And this has always been known, yet everybody is keeping silent. Epidemiological studies are now showing that in the United States of America, about 60 to 80% of violent prison inmates have had a history of traumatic brain injury. And we have always known that. This is not something novel. That whoever suffers traumatic brain injury has an increased proclivity to engage in violent behaviors, to be disinhibited, engage in sexual improprieties and criminal behavior. Now, I was born in 1968. This was a paper published in 1957, 11 years before I was born. This paper was published by the American Academy of Pediatrics that stated that no child in America under the age of 12 should be allowed to play football, wrestling, or boxing because these violent games damage the musculoskeletal growth plates of children. Then they did not know about the risks of brain damage. This was in 1957. In 1976, this is the Lancet Journal, one of the most respected medical journals in medicine. It stated, this was an editorial, that it was foolhardy for mankind to continue to expose mankind intentionally to the risk of brain damage in certain types of sports. But what baffled me, my brothers and sisters, America and the whole world kept quiet. They followed up in 2011. Now, in conjunction with the Canadian Society of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatrics published another position paper that boxing is not a sport. That the objective of boxing is to inflict harm on the brain of your opponent. That cannot be classified as a sport. In fact, I see no reason why boxing remains an Olympic sport. And they recommended that no child should play or be allowed to engage in boxing. And in confirmational intelligence, what did the world do? We all chose to look the other way. This is another paper that came out in 2014. This was by, Talavaj from Purdue University. A very beautiful paper. They followed high school students for one season who played football without any documented concussion whatsoever, only after one season. And they subjected them to functional MRI studies and neuropsychiatric testing, and guess what? They identified evidence of permanent brain damage, even without a documented concussion. This was another paper. And this is not about football, no. This is about any human activity whereby your head is exposed to repeated blows. Like Will Smith said in one of the scenes in Concussion, that God did not intend for man to play football. Parents who have the habit of smacking their children on the head should stop that. Spouses who hit their spouses on the head for whatever reason should stop that. Adults who have the habit of engaging in sex whereby they slam each other's head, you should stop that. This is not about a specific activity. And the question, Ireland, you must ask yourself, rugby is your national sport. Could you answer this question for me? People who play rugby, are their heads exposed to repeated blows, yes or no? Thank you so much, I love you. So it doesn't matter the debate. The question you have to ask yourself is, in playing rugby, is the player's head exposed to repeated blows? And is the brain subjected to repeated acceleration, deceleration? If the answer to that is yes, don't listen to no one else. Some people will tell you we don't have enough evidence. Oh, yes. If you place a gun on your head and fire the trigger, you will kill yourself. Do you need to generate studies to confirm that? There are certain things that are common sense and are generally accepted principles of science and common knowledge. We know that all forms of traumatic brain injury are dangerous. There is nothing like a safe blow to the head. This is another paper that shows that a child that suffers at least one concussion shows evidence of impairment in neurological development, executive functioning, and attention focus span, inability to assimilate new information. In 2002, while I was struggling to find a name for this disease, I Googled chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Google got confused. Go on today, Google chronic traumatic encephalopathy, you will have at least 100,000 hits. It is real. Studies have been independently validated and reproduced by researchers all across the world. This is no longer something to be debated. Some people will tell you, oh, we don't have enough evidence. Give us money, let's do some research. This was a paper that came out in August of last year from Sweden, whereby they looked at 1.1 million children who have suffered at least one documented concussion and presented to the emergency room. One documented concussion in sports. They followed them up for 41 years. Now, guess what? Hold on tight to your seats. They show that if your child sustains at least one concussion in sports, your child is more likely to die before the age of 42 than the general population. Your child is more likely to drop out of high school. It's more likely not to attend college. It's more likely to have psychiatric problems, including depression, as an adult. It's more likely to be unproductive as an adult and be less gainfully employed. It's more likely to be dependent on disability and welfare systems of state. 1.1 million children followed for 40 years. What other study do you need? And that is why this study never mentioned chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That is why we need to move away from that. It's ironic that the man who named chronic traumatic encephalopathy is telling you to move away from it. Because it's the truth. It's not about me. It's never been about me. Now, what we have done while people are debating back and forth, CTE, myself and some other doctors gathered together, raised about $100,000, identified a radioligand we call FDDNP, discovered at the University of California, Los Angeles in the 1990s. We scanned 5 football players we began to recognize a pattern. We expanded it to 20, including military veterans, and identified a specific PET scanning pattern that was diagnostic of CTE in the living. And what you see is a positive case. The radioligand binds to tau and amyloid. And we are finding that the highest densities of neurodegeneration in the brain using PET scanning is around the parasagittal structures and the periventricular structures of the brain. Guess what? The parts of the human brain that are most exposed to acceleration, deceleration forces are the parasagittal structures and the periventricular structures, because the brain rotates around its midline, and these midline structures bear the maximal forces of acceleration, deceleration. And because of the differential density between the ventricle, which is a vacuum, and the neural peel of the brain, energy is more likely to focalize around the periventricular white matter and subcortical nuclei. We have further identified a progressive changes in the brains of people who've been exposed as you get older, consistent with the neuropathology. And we have also identified the blast variant of CTE. So once we can identify and quantify CTE in a living person, we can now begin to test out treatment modalities. This was a paper we recently presented. The abstract was presented. The paper should be coming out this fall. I'm currently working on it with Dr. Small. I had the neuropathology effort. So we've identified the blast variant of CTE because we believe a good proportion of the so-called PTSDs in military veterans is not psychological, but organic, due to acceleration, deceleration, blast injuries. And guess what? The first case that we scanned with FDDNP died last year, unfortunately. I did his autopsy. This paper should be published very soon. And we did a correlative analysis of the PET scan findings and the neuropathology. We did a correlative analysis, and guess what? It passed. There was a high correlation between the FDDNP findings and the neuropathological findings. The FDA in the United States, which is the Food and Drug Administration, has guided us to a clinical phase 3 trial. It will cost about $10 million. I wish I was Bill Gates' son. Well, we're trying to raise $10 million. But all the sports leagues would do everything within their means to stop us. Why? You shouldn't be afraid of the truth. The truth is inconvenient. But you cannot deny or reject the truth because of the inconvenience of the truth. Because come what may, the truth will prevail. It may take a long time to come, but I guarantee you it will prevail. So my brothers and sisters, we now go back to the central limit theory and back to conformational intelligence. You are beginning to see conformational intelligence in every aspect of our lives, including in our politics. We are becoming more tribal because of the group we may belong to. After the sports leagues across the world, in business management, your brand is about the most precious asset you may have, your brand equity. Mercedes-Benz today may cost about $90,000. It is that expensive not because it's the best car in the world, but because of the brand, the name on it. Take out that name Mercedes-Benz from the car, the value would drop. If sports leagues across the world continue to undermine their brand by denying the truth about the effects of traumatic brain injury, their brand equity is going to bleed. In fact, in the United States of America, it is already bleeding. The truth is empowering. The truth is enlightening. Embrace the truth. Speak the truth. Do not be afraid of the truth. Because the truth can only be the truth can only be vindicated. The truth can only be enlightening and empowering. Do not be afraid. I believe we have the ingenuity as a species to create solutions, but not in fear, not in denial of the truth. There is no alternative truth. And the truth remains, my brothers and sisters, that if you engage in whatever human activity whereby your head is exposed to repeated blows, you will have a 100% risk exposure to permanent brain damage, with or without a helmet, with or without a concussion. We don't know how many blows it may take. In some people, it takes only one. This is the truth. What do we do about it? I am not for the banning of any sport, no. But like we have done historically, in sharing our common humanity, whenever we identify a possible or a probable risk factor, the first thing we do is to protect the most vulnerable of us, our children. Knowing what we know today, there is no reason, no justifiable reason whatsoever that a child under the age of 18, which is the age of consent, when your brain is fully developed, should continue to engage in the high impact, high contact, collision sports. Not every sport. Children should engage in the non-contact, non-impact sports, swimming, volleyball, badminton, table tennis, good old track and field, lawn tennis, basketball. In these games, you could still suffer incidental or accidental trauma. But we do all we can to mitigate the risk of accidental trauma in these non-contact sports. But these other non-brain-friendly sports, the high-impact collision sports, should be left only for adults. My middle name is Ifakandu. Life is the greatest gift of all, is African. Life is the greatest gift of all. My good friend Will Smith at a conference asked everybody, how many of us wake up in the morning to do something uplifting? Maybe pray, practice yoga, meditate, read a book. Some of us would exercise to uplift ourselves. So can somebody tell me who wakes up in the morning, puts on a helmet, and slams his head on the wall? But that is what we have our children do. Playing these games rob our children of their intuition and intellect. What defines them fundamentally as human beings? Why would you want to do that to your child? I have a 7-year-old son, Mark, a 9-year-old daughter, Ashley. If I wouldn't let them play, it would be unethical and unchristian for me to tell another man or woman to let his or her child play. Hippocrates made me take an oath. First, do no harm. Do not be afraid of the changes that would come, because whether you like it or not, it's coming. We as a species, we evolve. But in faith, through the humanity of our faith and the humanity of science, I bet you the impossible becomes possible. If we don't play rugby, if children do not play rugby, it's not going to bring about the end of Ireland. For Ireland will become better for it. Traumatic brain injury suffered in sports cost the American economy $1.3 trillion in 30 years from lost productivity brought about by the damages caused by traumatic brain injury. The fertility rate in the developed society is going down. So our children are becoming more precious commodity. It's becoming a global economy, more competitive economy. So do we rather undermine the intellect and intuition and intelligence of our children and let the children from other parts of the world become more competitive because of some conformational intelligence? No. No. Thank you so much.